I cannot believe that my marriage is over just because I made this joke and this is my life now.
I don't even know how to start this because I obviously have no right way of putting this. But, you see, it was a joke. Well, I thought it was, but he obviously didn't think so. And that eventually led to me losing everything I've worked so hard for. So let me go and tell you guys about it all. The joke that made me lose my husband, I am not proud of this because it turned out to be an expensive joke. A very expensive one at that. Hello Reddit, my name is Shimmer, and I'm 26 years old, and I am a model. Was a model. As you must have guessed from my name, my mother loved anything that glistened and shined, which eventually led to my father's bankruptcy, and me eventually having to pay them all off. Well, you see, my mother had been born into a very wealthy family and was the only child, so she was spoiled beyond comprehension. Anything she wanted was hers for the taking, and she took advantage of that fact a lot to taunt people around her. Her father had had some issues with his company. He had taken out a loan to invest enough capital into a business, which eventually failed, and that made him fall into loads of debt, which automatically meant he couldn't sponsor my mother's luxurious lifestyle anymore. He died under the pressure of the debts he had to pay back, and everything that he owned when he was alive was seized to make up for his debts. My mother could not bear having to live as a poor girl, so she seduced my father, who at that time was much older than her by 22 years. She got pregnant, and he, my father, who was widowed with 2 sons, had no choice but to marry her. He paid off the rest of the debts my grandfather left behind, and he continued to sponsor my mother's luxurious lifestyle, and this continued until he went bankrupt. His 2 sons, my stepbrothers, who are way older than me because of how many years had passed since their own mother died before my father remarried my mom, you get the gist, refused to have anything to do with paying back my father's debts because they knew that the debts were acquired from having to support my mother's lifestyle. Growing up with my mother had always been pretty exhausting because she wanted me to dress in a certain type of way, eat in an elegant manner, and in fact, everything I did was supposed to show how well elegant I was brought up. I was a fat baby when I was growing up, and that displeased my mother, who wanted a thin and sexy, beautiful child, so she would feed me less and say she was helping me reduce weight. I got so used to it that if I ate more, I would throw up. My mother was the one who decided she wanted me to be a model. It was originally her dream, but because she was considered too slim, she didn't get the chance. So she was prepared to make sure I got the chance she missed. Ever since I was able to speak perfect English and walk without stumbling, I've been learning how to model. In fact, my mother would pay off some people so I could appear on screen advertising for something, even as a child. All my life, I grew up living my mother's dream, which was infiltrated into mine. When my father went bankrupt and could not sponsor my mother's lifestyle again, she shipped me off to live with her cousin, Raya. She was just the sweetest person to me and treated me for once like I wasn't an object under scrutiny. She gave me a choice of what I wanted to eat or not. She would let me choose my dress and would allow me to suggest the style I wanted my hair to be braided in. I loved living with her so much that I never wanted to leave, but eventually my father died and I was summoned home for his burial. I didn't even cry much because of my dramatic mother who kept running towards the grave dug and the coffin being passed into it and flinging herself over it, asking they bury her with my father. I knew it was all a facade so people would think she loved him very much, despite the age differences between them. Another reason I didn't cry was because my father and I weren't close. We didn't share that father and daughter's bond every one of my classmates in school seemed to have with their own father. He was mostly after pleasing my mother and never paid much attention to me. In fact, whenever he was around, I ensured I was not available or anywhere near wherever he was at that moment. After my father's burial, the next day, Mom had called me and stated how displeased she was about the extra fat I've put on since I went to her cousin. She complained bitterly and forced me to start training and starving because, according to her, I was the next family food ticket, so I had to be good enough. Even as an underage, because of my shape and tallness, which was the only thing I got from my dad, I was modeling for a lot of things, both for teenagers and even adults. My mother was my manager. She screened everyone I met and everything I did. I didn't have any friends. Let me rephrase this. I wasn't allowed to have friends because, according to my mother, they were just mere distractions, and she didn't want me distracted. I didn't even get to soil my dress and be scolded lovingly by my mother. All I received were lectures on how perfect I should be and how I couldn't make any mistakes of any sort. As young as I was modeling lingerie for stores, and they sold lots because of me. I was young, flashy, and I had fine skin and legs that go on and on. Oh, I was bullied because of my looks in school. Funny, right? Because you'd expect that an ugly person or a nerd would be bullied in school, not a girl being bullied because she was a model. One time a classmate, Chloe, had called me names in school, and I had been so upset. I told my mother once I was back home, and she shrugged her shoulders and told me that I would probably hear worse things than that, and that I should toughen up because once I did, then no one would be able to break my skin again. And I did as she asked me. I toughened up, became the girl that my mother wanted me to be, perfect and beautiful and flawless too. Chloe's words, or anyone else's for that matter, didn't mean anything to me anymore. I was Shimmer. And then I got a contract with the biggest modeling agency, the one my mother had always wanted to work with. My mother had been more excited than I was about the whole thing. I was happy, of course, but only because she was happy. One time, I went for an interview for a modeling job, and the director in charge had offered to have sex with me in exchange for the job. I had been so horrified I had slapped him hard across the face and walked out. When I got home and told my mother, the reaction I expected from her wasn't what I got. She had screamed, shouting at me and asking me why I had refused, since it was just a one-time thing and I had lost that chance to someone else. Honestly, I had been so shocked by what my mother had said, but ignored it and continued schooling and going for modeling jobs. One day, I decided to come home earlier than usual from school because I was feeling sick, and I remember the school nurse phoning to inform my mom about my illness. But my mom hadn't picked any of the calls, and the school nurse eventually had to let me go home because of how I was feeling. When I got home, I was hearing moaning sounds, and surprised, I followed the sound to my mother's room, only to find her in bed with my eldest stepbrother, Dan. I was so shocked and gasped loudly, but of course they were too involved in each other to even notice me. When I confronted my mother about her affair, she shrugged it off as nothing, and casually told me that her husband was dead and she was still young, so why not a young man to warm her bed, especially since he was family too. I was disgusted by her thoughts and actions. Even now, I wonder what caused Father's quick death, if not her cheating. I never got the answer though. After the incident of my mother and Dan, I worked harder than ever before, so I could go to college and leave from under the woman's wicked clutches. After high school, I gained admission to study music. I didn't particularly like music that much, but my agent suggested it so I could also get familiar with that, because they wanted me to start acting in films too. I didn't object because I just wanted anything except staying with my mom. During my college days also, I modeled as a side gig to get money to pay my bills. Before long, I found it was much easier to exploit men for their money. Men, both young and old, flocked around me because of my beauty, so it was quite easy living the luxurious lifestyle that my mother taught me. All the years I spent in college, I didn't visit my mother, not even once. I didn't want her to know that I was living the exact same lifestyle I hated her for. So I stayed back in school, and whenever there were holidays, I would hang out in clubs. One time, I even started dancing at the famous club. No one knew me though, because of the loads of makeup I would use to cover up my real face, and also I wore a mask on my face whenever I was dancing. I know what you're all thinking, but I didn't sleep with any man at the club. Well, except one, Marvel. Marvel was my first boyfriend. He was the one who introduced me to that club because he worked there as their manager, and when he realized I could dance, he had convinced me to dance for fun. I didn't know he was collecting money from those men who watched me dance. I just felt I was dancing for fun. Well, that was until Marvel started telling me to strip a little for the men who came to watch me, just to tease them for fun. At first I found it strange, but I wanted to please Marvel so much that I did what he asked me. But eventually he wanted me to start revealing my face and stripping nearly every piece of clothing. I refused, of course, and he ended things between us. I was happy he did, because if I had continued that lifestyle, my day job as a model would have ended before it even began. I concentrated on modeling and my course in music. I stopped even collecting money from men for the fun of it, because I realized that I was becoming my mother through and through. Did I mention that not once did she call when I was in college to check up on me? She never rang me to see how I was doing or how I was managing my job and school. My mother was a selfish woman, and I didn't want to end up like her. When I finished college, I got a major big deal to model for an international company. I was also given an all-expenses-paid trip to their headquarters in another state so I could understand clearly the product I was modeling for. I was super excited and packed my bags and went on the trip. It was there I met Austin.
No.
Austin happened to be the owner of the international company I was modeling for, and though he was way older than me, I was happy he took an interest in me. Austin was originally 11 years older than me, but that clearly didn't make any difference when I fell in love with him and married him. At first, I hadn't had any feelings for Austin, but he was so easy to love that I was already neck deep before I realized. He was sweet and gentle, and he knew how to make good conversations. We spoke for hours at length most times, and even if we had nothing to say, he would come up with something that would eventually lead to us talking an extra hour or two. Despite being very, very rich, he was very humble, and it was clear that all his workers clearly adored him. When Austin asked me to be his girlfriend, I was super excited and said yes almost immediately. We started dating, and within 2 months of dating, we got married. Yes, our relationship was short, but we both knew what we wanted, and as Austin would say, I never waste time with something I know is for me, and that's what makes me a very rich businessman. It was true, though. Austin was one man that I knew had very sharp instincts, and whenever he listened to them, he always ended up being right about any situation, work or personal. When we got married, guess who was more excited than I was? My mother. She thought that my husband would sponsor her luxurious lifestyle like her father did, and ended up ruining himself and her husband too. My own father ended up the same way. I wasn't going to let her do that to my husband, so I refused to invite her for the wedding as anything other than an acquaintance. She, of course, was pissed, but I didn't mind. I was done playing her little games and being used as a pawn or bait to get whatever she wanted. Luckily for her, Austin managed to convince me not to abandon her, so we placed her on a strict monthly allowance. It pissed her off because she was used to having unlimited access to money, but I couldn't care less. I was happy being married to Austin because I loved him and he loved me too. I didn't stop working as a model though, not because of the money, but because I loved being a model. Austin was very supportive of my work and would even employ me to work with his company from time to time, and whenever I refused payment, he would insist it was for the job I did and pay me. He treated me nicely and made sure, despite his busy schedules, he had time for me, and I loved that about him. One time I had to work in another city, and he was very busy, so I couldn't inform him about it. I went alone, and after settling in and starting the photography sessions, I saw him with the media crew waiting for me. I was so happy and proud that my husband supported my job so much, he would make time for me. All through our first 2 years of being married, we had no fights. Not that we didn't, but it was nothing too big that we couldn't sort before going to bed that night. Well, our 3rd year of being married, I was called home by my stepbrother Ben, who was the only one I did speak to. After the incident of seeing my mom and Dan together, I never spoke to him after that, and ever since I got married, my mom too had joined the list of people I didn't speak to. She tried several times to get a hold of me, would travel down to my house, but I would inform the security not to let her in. I didn't want to see or talk to her at all. Ben told me she, my mother, had died in a car accident. She had been drunk and had a head-on collision with a truck carrying wood, so she had died almost instantly. I went home to fulfill my duties as her only child, but Austin couldn't go with me because he had meetings lined up that he couldn't walk away from. So I went alone and arranged her burial ceremony. Funnily, many people turned up and had a lot of good things to say about her. I knew it was all a charade. They just wanted to come see me, whether or not I turned out like my mother. Only a few of them knew I was married to Austin, a multi-billionaire. I discharged everyone as quickly as I could because I had been exhausted from having to pretend to be a daughter who cared about her mother. The person I saw last was the most shocking to me. It was Chloe, and she was looking like she had swallowed a ball, and a man, a very handsome man, had been holding her hand as she walked towards me to offer her obviously fake condolences. I had prepared to give her a cold remark to whatever she said, since I knew what she was there for when she walked towards me with a genuine smile. By that time, the young gentleman had released her hand and gone in search of someone in the room after offering me his condolences. She smiled again after he left and rubbed her stomach, offering me her condolences, to which I just smiled falsely and said thank you. The crazy thing was, she started chatting with me like we were old friends and telling me that she was 6 months gone and couldn't even wait for the baby to come, and also so she could have her wedding in September and fit in her wedding dress. She also told me that she started working as a school teacher in our old high school and that her boyfriend was a model but hadn't gotten good gigs recently, so things had been tight, especially with the baby coming. All I heard from all her gibberish at the time was her not being married to the handsome guy, who I later found out his name was Harris, and that he was a model. It was the perfect time to make Chloe pay for what she did in high school, so I smiled and offered to pitch in for Harris for a job. She had been so happy not knowing I had a plan. My original plan had been employing Harris, and taking him far away from Chloe would be a big punishment for what she did to me in high school, or keep him so busy he would barely have time for her. So I got him loads of modeling jobs in which I was the manager. I told Austin that I had business to settle, so I had to stay back a while, and he reluctantly agreed because he couldn't come because of work. I ensured I worked Harris to the bone, and he was pretty exhausted by the end of the day. Whether the picture was fine or not, I had him pose over hundreds of times again, and eventually choose the ones he had done before. One time, Chloe had come to see me and asked if I could reduce the workload of Harris because he never had time for her again, and with the baby coming, she was stressed and all. I gently reminded her she asked me to give him a chance and told her that Harris wasn't the best out there, that I only started the project because I accepted her request since we were old-time friends. Chloe had agreed and left my place looking like a swollen bag of potatoes. I remember being so happy seeing her like that, and I had even toasted to the air with my most expensive wine. I continued making Harris pay for Chloe's sins, and I guessed he must have noticed because he came to me one time and asked why I'd been so hard on him and treated him poorly. I had been so caught up in my revenge that another human was suffering for it. I apologized, and he asked if he could join me for dinner as a truce. I agreed and ordered us food to eat since I couldn't cook, but Harris had asked that I cancel the order and he would cook. I had been very surprised as to how a man would know his way around the kitchen, but he did. Harris was really good with the knives and everything else. Before an hour, dinner was ready and it was very delicious. We talked for a while and I found out that we had similar interests, so the conversation between us flowed easily. When it was time for him to leave, he offered to cook me another delicious homemade meal the next day, and I agreed. I didn't even know I was falling into a trap. He came the next day around dinner time and whipped up something good again. We ended up talking way past curfew, and he ended up sleeping at my house. I know what you're all thinking, but we didn't sleep together. He slept in a different room and a different bed. It became a routine, Harris coming over to my place, cooking me dinner, and us having conversations about things we normally or usually don't discuss with other people. He even told me once that he had come here for a side gig, and he had met Chloe. And because she knew he was going to leave, she had purposely gotten pregnant, and that had led to him staying there fully. I had also confided in him about the real reason I had employed him, about Chloe's bullying and the revenge I had in mind. One evening, per usual, we had dinner, talked, and I received a text message from my husband that he was going to call me on video call in 10 minutes, and he was teasing me, telling me to wear something sexy. I had to let Harris leave because I didn't want Austin asking questions. So I told him I had to do something important and would see him the next day. Well, I opened the door, and when he was outside waving goodbye, he grabbed the door handle to stop me from pushing it to lock and kissed me. I was surprised and couldn't react, but the ringtone of my phone jolted me into action and I pushed him away, then locked the door. I was so shocked, and throughout my video call with my husband, I was very distracted as my thoughts kept swaying to the kiss. Austin even noticed I was distracted and did ask me. I lied that it was work-related. We spoke for another 25 minutes before Austin said goodnight. After that, I couldn't sleep. I was thinking about the kiss and asking myself different questions as to why Harris would have kissed me when he knew I was married and that he had a baby coming with his girlfriend. The next day, I avoided him as much as I could. In fact, I didn't even complain about the shoots. Just wanted to stay as far away from him as possible. I didn't want to have to cheat on my husband, because I did love Austin. Harris came over that evening, and I told him I had already ordered pizza and wasn't hungry and wanted to rest. He left, accepting my excuses. I avoided Harris for a whole week. It wasn't easy, as we literally worked together, and he was trying his hardest to get my attention. And also, my feelings were all over the place, as since the kiss, I started to view him in another light. Started to take notice of his abs and his smile that lit his entire face. One time, he had been doing a water advertisement, and he was drinking water, making sure the water was dripping down his jaw to his chest. My throat had been so parched, I felt I could lick off the water on his chest and be satisfied. I snapped out of it and left early that day, trusting another person with the work. I thought it was because I was sexually frustrated, and at that point, I hated that Austin wasn't with me there, because if I had my husband by my side, maybe I wouldn't be lusting after another man. One night I was mugged. They made away with all the money and jewelry I had. I wasn't bothered about the amount of money they took, and neither did the jewelry bother me because I could replace them all if I wanted to. But I was very scared to stay in the house alone, because when they had come in at first, one of them had hit me on the head with the edge of the gun in his hand, and I had fainted. By the time I was awake, they had already left. I called Austin, but it was his secretary who picked up, and she told me how caught up with work he was. I told her to tell him I said hi instead of saying what I wanted to say. I didn't want to disturb him anymore because I knew he would probably abandon work and come running to me, and that would mean losing a significant amount of money. So I called the closest person to me around, and it was Harris. He came running and told me how worried he was when he got my call. I hugged him tightly, scared, and asked if Chloe was aware he was with me, and he answered with a no, that she slept deeply. He stayed with me at home throughout the night, and by the time it was morning, his phone was blowing up with calls from Chloe. He picked up the call and lied that he had to run an errand in town, and he left early so he didn't wake her up and start panicking that he was leaving that early. Even to me, the story he made up sounded pathetic, but Chloe seemed to believe him and wished him a safe trip before dropping the call. I couldn't believe he lied to the mother of his unborn child because of me, and that touched me so much because, apart from my husband, no one had ever stood up for me, and he was doing that. In my head, it felt like he was standing up for me, which obviously wasn't the case, but I at that point was clearly not listening to my brain, but my heart, as I had pulled his face into my palm and kissed him. Well, the rest is, you can probably guess. We slept together that day. After that day, I felt so guilty because I had cheated on my husband, and I still loved Austin very much. Harris confronted me when he realized I had been avoiding him again, and I gave him some excuses which he didn't buy. Eventually, we had sex again. We continued our affair. Harris was so addicting. He just had a way with his hands that made me consider Austin as though a good husband, but not good enough when it came to satisfying a woman. Chloe didn't suspect a thing, and thought of me as her good friend and was always telling me anything, sometimes about the baby or about Harris. I started getting jealous whenever she told me Harris bought her a few things because it's my money originally, and I pay Harris for working with me and some extra tips I gave him whenever he had money issues. Harris never bought me anything. I didn't mind at first because I could buy myself anything I wanted, but it began to bother me when Chloe would tell me Harris bought her gifts every time he came home. I knew I had no right to be jealous, but I couldn't help feeling that way. I started insisting Harris spent more than a few hours with me, so most times he was always at my place. That was until Austin came around. Austin had rounded up his business and suspended everything else to come be with me. I was happy to see Austin because he had come to where we were shooting. Harris and I as a couple for a couple sets of clothing. I was so surprised to see him, and he had hugged and kissed me right there in front of everyone. And I saw out of the corner of my eye that Harris had been jealous. Throughout the remaining photo sessions, Austin was there, and whenever I had a break, he was right beside me, giving me water or wiping off the sweat that had gathered from all the lights from the photography equipment. Harris kept to himself throughout, clearly not pleased with the whole situation. Before I had any chance to see Harris again was another week, and that was because Austin made sure he didn't leave my side. Not that I didn't exactly see him, but I couldn't talk to him privately because Austin was around, and we couldn't hang out at my place like we did before. So I arranged a celebration party for my team, including the models. Austin wanted to come along, but I dissuaded him, saying it was only for the team, and besides, everyone would feel intimidated if I brought my husband, when I specifically said it was for the team alone, and he had reluctantly agreed. When the team had gathered, I made sure everyone had plenty to drink and eat. Harris barely touched his food or drink, and just looked like he was desperate to leave the place. When I was sure everyone was tipsy, some already very drunk, I made my move. I sent him a text to meet me in the bathroom, and he should leave in about 2 minutes after I'd left the table. I waited impatiently for him, and when he eventually did show up, I apologized for the previous week and us not seeing each other, and he, clearly jealous, just told me he didn't like how Austin kept touching and kissing me like I was his property, and I had laughed and jokingly said I indeed was, but Harris had just become more mad, and I had calmed him down. We kissed and made up before I left the bathroom, and he also left a few minutes after I had already left too. Don't get me wrong, I loved my husband Austin very much, but I liked Harris, especially because he was better at sex than Austin was. I regret it now, but at that time, I was not thinking clearly and just wanted it all. Austin's deep pockets and his love and Harris for his sexual prowess. Well, I guess no secrets can be kept for that long, as mine was also actually discovered. Or should I say had been discovered way long before I knew it would be, well, apparently by the last guy that I would never have thought of. Jason was the guy who drove me around. He was mostly silent, just always watching people around, and I had always dismissed him as an ordinary guy and paid him no attention. But apparently he had been hired by my husband to protect me and report back to him any unusual thing he noticed around me or about me, and I didn't even know that. And apparently, to be able to drive me home, Jason had sat at another table and ordered drinks, but didn't touch them, and had noticed Harris following me into the bathroom, and he had followed us and recorded our conversation. And apparently he had been reporting to his boss about the occasional visits from Harris and the occasional sleepovers he's been having too. I guess the record he made of us actually sealed the whole thing for Austin, and he confronted me about it. I had been shocked at first, then laughed and covered it up with a joke that I was actually joking with Harris that night. Funny thing is, Austin believed me, but I had just been so nervous and couldn't keep my mouth shut. I was in my head trying to cover loose ends, and I had jokingly said that if perhaps I did cheat on him with Harris, it would be because Harris was younger and his sexual prowess would be applause-worthy. I was only joking about it, but Austin had just looked at me and then left. I tried calling and texting him, but he wouldn't respond to either one. The next thing that was mailed to me was a sealed document, and when I opened it, it was a divorce paper, and it had already been signed by one party, Austin. I tried so hard to reach out, but traveling seemed impossible as my cards had been blocked, so I had no access to my account anymore, or let me say Austin's accounts. Please, I really need your advice, guys. I cannot lose Austin. I love him very much, please. Update. Hello, Reddit. It's me again. To say I'm depressed is a total understatement of my feelings right now. I cannot begin to say how much I regret ever cheating on Austin. I'm extremely doomed, and the backlashing comments I receive from my posts just make me feel even worse. I got pregnant for Harris because of our affair, and I don't even have enough money on me to have an abortion. I had to sell my father's house where I stayed before to cater to my needs and that of the unborn unlucky child for having a failed mother already. I had to move to a smaller apartment with the money I got, and had to sell my expensive dresses to get cheaper ones that could accommodate my growing belly. Harris moved in with me and Chloe too. Yes, we all live together now, and life has never been more frustrating before. Having to bear the snickers and the barely concealed hatred of Chloe. Even getting by every day seems so hard, and Harris also seems to blame me for every problem he has. They're both feeding off the money I have left with me, but they still blame me for everything that has happened. I feel so horrible for losing the one person that cared about me the most, regardless of my past, and taught me how to turn those hurts into strength. But I clearly was proud enough to think I already got it, and when I came back home, only to fall into some sick, twisted revenge plot that eventually landed me in a worse situation than I have ever been in my life. I regret everything so much, and every day is a reminder of what I could have had but lost due to my reckless behavior. I took for granted what I got not because I was worth it, and now I've lost it and can't get it back. I cannot even put into words efficiently how awful I feel every time of the day. I keep wishing I had never come here, or just left after my mother's burial when I had the chance to. But now, I don't even have the option of leaving. My life is just totally ruined. Update. Hello Reddit, this is my last post here, and I just wanted to say, well, thank you for reading my story, and I know how true it is what all your comments say about me. I'm a horrible, horrible person that will forever pay for her sins of losing a good man. I'm in an abyss of my own creating, a hell decorated just for me. Everything tends to remind me of how stupid I was. I feel so scared because my growing belly and the little kicks I feel in my tummy remind me every day that soon enough, I'd be a mother. It scares the daylight out of me because I never had a good mother. And with what I did to Austin, I don't think I have any chances of being even a fairly good mother to my unborn child. Learn from me, guys. Believe me when I tell you that it really never pays to cheat. Thanks and goodbye. Hey Reddit, a first-time poster here and first time using this app, so I hope I'm doing this right. I've been stumbling upon a lot of Reddit videos on TikTok where people share their stories and get advice from the community, so I decided to give it a shot. I'm hoping to remain completely anonymous, as nobody I know uses Reddit, so this feels like a good space for me to process my feelings and hopefully get some perspective. This is a long one, so if you've got the patience, I'd really appreciate your thoughts. Before I dive into the details, let me give you some context. My name is Emma, and I'm 30 years old. I've been married to Tom, who is also 30, for about 3 years now. We met in our last year of college, dated for a few more years after that, and then got married. Overall, things have been great between us. Sure, it hasn't always been perfect, what relationship is, but I genuinely thought we had an amazing connection. Now, just to put things in perspective and not as an excuse, I need to explain a bit about my background. I've always struggled with deep-seated insecurities and paranoia about being cheated on. This stems from my past relationships. I was cheated on quite badly in a previous relationship, and even in another one before that. So you can imagine, these experiences left me with a lot of unresolved trauma and fear about infidelity. When I met Tom, I was open about my past and these issues. He was incredibly understanding and supportive. To help ease my anxieties, he's always gone out of his way to make me feel secure. He's been transparent with his phone, passwords, and whereabouts. Basically, he's done everything he can to build and maintain my trust. Now, despite all of Tom's efforts, my insecurities have been a major problem in our relationship, even though I've always tried to fight them. I've struggled with constant doubt and irrational fears that have started to severely impact our marriage. Things took a turn for the worse when Tom started a new job. At first, the changes seemed minor. Tom began working late more often, which he explained as part of the demands of his new managerial role. He had more responsibilities, and as he put it, the nature of his job required extra hours. His phone, which he used to put down more often, was now constantly in his hand. He'd receive calls and texts during odd hours, and sometimes he'd need to take work calls even late into the evening. In hindsight, many of these changes seem so insignificant, but at the time, they set off alarm bells in my mind. The more I noticed these things, the more my anxiety grew. I found myself scrutinizing every text message he received, and every call he took. Even though Tom had always been open about his phone and his whereabouts, I started to question his every move. My mind began to race with thoughts of betrayal. I didn't have any concrete evidence, just gut feelings and irrational thoughts that seemed to consume me. I would imagine scenarios where Tom was cheating, despite the fact that he had always been nothing but honest and loving. The constant worry and suspicion began to chip away at my trust. I kept feeling that something was off. Even though deep down I knew I had no real reason to doubt him, my insecurities started to dominate my thoughts and my behavior toward Tom. I began to distance myself from him, even though he was only trying to support me. I began voicing my concerns to Tom, often starting with what I thought were reasonable questions, but my tone would then quickly shifted to one of accusation. It started with comments like, "You're always on your phone. Who are you talking to?" Or, "You're working late again. Are you seeing someone else?" Each time, Tom looked confused and hurt by these accusations, but he always did his best to reassure me. He explained his extended work hours, allowed me to see his phone whenever I asked, and even introduced me to the colleagues he was working with. Despite his constant reassurances, my doubts didn't go away. My paranoia only grew stronger. I started to obsessively check Tom's phone whenever he wasn't around, scrutinizing his social media accounts, and even going through his email. I was driven by the desperate hope of finding something, anything, that could confirm my fears. But despite my constant searching, I found nothing. It felt like I was on a never-ending chase for proof of cheating, only to come up empty-handed every single time. I overreacted to the smallest things. When Tom bought new clothes, I accused him of buying them to impress someone else, even though he had already explained that the new wardrobe was for a professional event. When he mentioned attending a work dinner with a mixed-gender group, I was convinced he was cheating on me. I expressed my suspicions to our friends, hoping they would back me up, but they mostly reassured me and dismissed my concerns as baseless. Even something as simple as Tom going on a work trip became fodder for my accusations. I convinced myself that the trip was a cover for an affair, despite his repeated reassurances and explanations. I even called his family and my friends to rant about my suspicions, creating drama and making everyone aware of my doubts, even though there was no real evidence. Things came to a head one evening when Tom came home late after a business dinner. I had been stewing all night, letting my suspicions and insecurities fester, and when he finally walked through the door, I was ready to explode. I accused him of being with someone else, of lying to me, and of not caring about our marriage. I unleashed a torrent of hurtful things that I deeply regret now. I told him he was a liar and that he was intentionally hurting me. Tom was devastated by my accusations. He tried to explain himself again, but this time he was angry and hurt. He told me that my constant accusations and lack of trust were destroying our marriage. He said he couldn't keep living under the constant scrutiny and suspicion. But instead of listening, I brushed off his concerns, insisting he was just trying to deflect from the truth. Tom ignored me and went to bed, and a week later, he packed a bag and left. He said he needed time away to think, but it felt like he was closing the door on our marriage. He moved in with a friend, and since then, we've barely spoken. It all happened so suddenly. I've tried calling and texting, but he's always distant and unresponsive. When he does reply, it's either with silence or with safe, polite responses. I don't know what to do now. I regret my actions so much. I want my husband to come back home, but I don't know how to fix things. My paranoia and constant doubts pushed him away, and now I'm left with the painful realization of what I've done. I wish I could take back the hurtful things I said and somehow make things right, but it feels like it might be too late. Update. Hey Reddit, I want to start by saying thank you for the responses I received. I know I got flamed pretty hard, and I appreciate all the advice you gave me. Many of you suggested that I get therapy, and I hear you. I know now that I need it, and I'm planning to start going. I just didn't realize how much I needed it until now, and I'm finally ready to take that step. As for the update, things have been a bit confusing and overwhelming. I reached out to Tom, and we finally talked after not speaking for about a week and a few days. I was relieved and hopeful that we could work things out, but I ended up blowing it. During our conversation, Tom said he was sorry for the distance but needed time to calm down. He couldn't understand why I was so suspicious, and I told him he was being irrational. That set him off, and he started recounting all the times I'd embarrassed him in front of family and friends and made baseless accusations. He reminded me of the time I saw a text from a female colleague wishing him good luck on a project, and I accused him of flirting with her. I even brought it up during a family gathering, making things awkward. Then there was the incident when Tom started a new exercise routine. I accused him of meeting someone at the gym and even confronted his personal trainer about it. Tom said he felt humiliated by my behavior. He mentioned another instance when he received some praise from a female superior, and I accused him of seeking validation. I brought this up during a holiday dinner, which caused an uncomfortable conversation among our relatives. Tom also brought up how I went through his email without permission and confronted him about a friendly email from a female coworker at a family event, which made things very awkward. There were other examples too. Tom recalled how I accused him of using a meeting with a potential client as a cover for cheating. He also talked about a call from an unknown number that turned out to be a wrong number, but I accused him of hiding something and shared my suspicions with my family. He mentioned how I once saw him like a friend's vacation photos and accused him of trying to start a new relationship. And he reminded me of the time he lost his wallet, and I accused him of hiding his wallet to cover up an affair. With each example Tom brought up, I felt more numb and didn't know how to respond. He said I needed to do some serious soul-searching because I was going crazy and didn't even realize it. He made it clear that he was done with me unless I stopped with the accusations. He told me that he was as transparent as he could be and didn't know what else I needed. I apologized and agreed to change. He said he needed more time at his friend's place but would try coming back soon. I'm so happy because I've really missed him. I know I have a lot of work to do on myself, but I'm really hopeful that things can get better. Thank you all for the advice and support. Update. Hello Reddit, I didn't think I'd be updating here again, especially not under these circumstances. I really thought things were moving towards resolution with my husband, but I was wrong. A few days ago, Tom and I were on a phone call, and he dropped a bombshell. He told me that he didn't really want to come home anymore. I was completely shocked and immediately asked him why. Tom explained that he'd spent a lot of time thinking over the past few days and realized he didn't believe I could change. He said that my issues had been ongoing for years, and the idea of me suddenly changing in just a few weeks was unrealistic. He stressed that I needed therapy, and I told him through my tears that I was willing to start therapy if he just came home. But he said no. He reminded me of how much I had humiliated him, how my jealousy, paranoia, and insecurity had even led him to quit his last 2 jobs. He said he couldn't live like this anymore, and he couldn't continue with me under these conditions. Tom told me that the thought of coming back home to me actually scared him. He said he had genuinely tried his best, but he was at his wit's end. He admitted that this realization came to him when he couldn't shake the fear of returning home. I was devastated, and I ended up crying and hanging up on him. He tried calling me back a few times, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I was too afraid of hearing him mention divorce. I feel lost and don't know what to do. I don't want to call him or talk to him anymore because I'm terrified he'll bring up divorce. If he doesn't want to come back home, what's left? The only thing left seems to be the possibility of him wanting a divorce. I'm scared and I don't know how to handle this. I feel paralyzed by fear and uncertainty about the future. What do I do next? How can I fix this if he's already made up his mind? Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I know a lot of you have been asking for an update, but honestly, there's not much to share. Not much has happened, apart from the fact that I feel utterly alone. Many of you keep suggesting therapy, and I really want to go, but right now, it's just not an option unless I look into free therapy services. The reality is, I don't think I'll be able to afford it as much as I would like to. I need to secure and keep my savings, especially with everything that's happening. My husband seems serious about not coming back home, and if he doesn't, what's left? The only thing left is the looming possibility of him wanting a divorce, and if that happens, I'm screwed. I'll probably have to pay the rent and bills on my own, and I'd rather keep my savings for that so I don't end up stranded. I feel like I'm in a really dark place right now. I did reach out to my family and friends, hoping for some support, but even though they tried to console me lightly, they also made it clear that they think I deserve this. All of them. It's like they're not even on my side, and I'm only now fully realizing how bad I must have been. The extent of how irrational I've been is just now hitting me, and it's hard to come to terms with it. I feel utterly alone, like no one is on my side. Yes, I know what I did was wrong, and I know how bad it was, but still it hurts that no one is really supporting me through this. I'm honestly so tired already. Even showing up for work is hard. It's like every part of my life is falling apart, and I don't know how to stop it. I don't know what to do anymore. Everything feels like it's spiraling out of control, and I don't know how to pick up the pieces. I'm just trying to get through each day, but it's hard when you feel like you're facing everything alone. Update. Hey, Reddit. A bit of an update here. So, as I feared, my husband didn't change his mind and he wants a divorce. He's serious about it, and there's no turning back now. I finally mustered up the courage to text him back, and we talked about a lot of things. Honestly, it was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. I cried a lot, trying to hold on to any sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could still work things out. I asked him if there was still any chance for us, if there was any way we could save our marriage, but he was firm. He said no, and that he wanted a divorce. Hearing those words was like a punch to the gut. I don't think I've fully come to terms with it yet. It still feels unreal, like I'm stuck in some sort of nightmare that I keep hoping I'll wake up from. But I know deep down that this is my reality now. For everyone who's been DMing me and asking for an update, well, there's your update. My marriage is over, and I don't know what to do with myself. I feel lost, and everything feels so final. I'm trying to process everything, but it's so hard to wrap my head around the fact that the person I thought I'd spend my life with is no longer in it. I guess I just have to take it one day at a time, but right now, it feels like I'm drowning in a sea of emotions, and I can't seem to find my way to the surface. This isn't where I expected to be, and I'm not sure how to move forward from here. Update. Hey Reddit, mini update here. So today was the day my husband came to pack his stuff. I wasn't home when it happened, though. He reached out earlier to let me know he'd be coming by to grab his things, and I made the deliberate choice to leave the house before he arrived. I told him I hadn't changed the combination code so he could easily get into the house even if I wasn't there. I also told him I was busy and wouldn't be around to watch him pack. That was a complete lie. I wasn't busy at all. In fact, I had the day off. Instead of staying home, I got in my car and drove around aimlessly. I ended up getting some coffee, but it didn't really help. I parked somewhere quiet, and that's when it all hit me. I sat in my car and cried for what felt like hours. The tears just wouldn't stop. It's like all the emotions I've been holding back came rushing out at once. Eventually, I pulled myself together and whipped out my phone to make this update. I guess I needed a distraction, something to take my mind off everything, even if just for a moment. When I told him I wouldn't be home, he sounded worried over the phone, like he wasn't sure if I was okay. But honestly, I couldn't care less about how he feels right now. He's the one choosing to leave me. He's the one who decided to come and pack up his life, to divorce me, to end everything we had. This is all on him, right? I keep telling myself that to make the pain more bearable, but deep down, I know it's not that simple. I'm angry, heartbroken, and lost all at the same time. I know I've made mistakes, but it doesn't make this any easier to accept. Watching him walk away, even if I wasn't there to physically see it, feels like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. And the worst part is, I can't help but feel like I'm the one being abandoned, left behind to pick up the pieces of a life that no longer exists. I don't know what the next steps are from here. I don't know how to move on, or even if I'm ready to. Right now, I just feel numb. Everything is so overwhelming, and the future feels so uncertain. I guess I'm just taking it one breath at a time, hoping that eventually, things will start to make sense again. Update. Hey Reddit, I don't have much of an update today, but I just wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude. To everyone who reached out to check on me, offered advice, or simply took the time to send some kind words, thank you. Seriously, it means the world to me right now. I'm in such a difficult place, and knowing that there are internet strangers out there who care enough to offer support has been a real lifeline. Now, as for the hate comments, those of you who felt the need to kick me when I'm already down, you can all go fuck yourselves. I get it, okay? I was wrong. I made mistakes and I'm owning up to them. But what I don't need right now is a bunch of miserable, frustrated people piling on, trying to make me feel even worse. Yes, I know what I did. Yes, I know I hurt someone I loved. And yes, I'm trying to fix it. But there's a difference between constructive criticism and just being cruel, and some of you cross that line. The truth is, I should have never gotten into another relationship when I hadn't even healed from the trauma of my past ones. I let that unhealed trauma fester inside me, and eventually, it built up to the point where it destroyed one of the things I loved most, my marriage. I see that now, and I'm doing everything I can to pick up the pieces and work on myself. But it's a process, and it's going to take time. On a more positive note, my mom is here with me now. She was really worried after talking to me on the phone, said I didn't sound so good, so she decided to come over and stay for a few weeks. Even though she agrees that my husband was in the right, she's still my mom, and she cares about me. I think she could tell how much I was struggling, and honestly, I'm really grateful to have her here. Just having someone around who loves me, who's here to support me, is making a huge difference. She's been helping me around the house and keeping me company so I don't feel so alone, and it's been a real comfort. Right now, I'm just trying to take things day by day. I know there's a lot of work I need to do on myself, and I'm committed to doing it. So again, thank you to everyone who's shown me some kindness during this really tough time. It means more to me than I can say. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. It's been a couple of weeks since my last update, and I just wanted to check in and let you all know what's been going on. I know I've been kind of radio silent, which is a bit unusual for me, but honestly, there hasn't been much to update on. Until now, that is. So here it is. I got served. Yep, the papers came. I thought I would have a complete meltdown, but surprisingly, I didn't. I didn't even feel like crying at first. I guess I've been preparing myself for this moment, so when it finally happened, I was almost numb. Of course, the tears did come later, but in that moment, I just felt kind of hollow. Afterwards, my mom and dad showed up at my place. They drove 3 hours just to be with me, bless their hearts. I didn't even ask them to come, but they must have sensed that I needed them. We ended up having a movie night, just the three of us. It was comforting in a way I can't really describe. For a little while, it felt like I was a kid again, back when everything was simpler and the weight of the world wasn't constantly pressing down on my shoulders. I know this isn't the most dramatic update, but I wanted to share it with you all. I've been feeling pretty over everything lately, like I just want to fast forward through this whole nightmare, but at the same time, I know that's not possible. I'm stuck living it day by day, and some days are harder than others. But I also know that a lot of you have been following my posts and supporting me, and I owe it to you to keep you in the loop. Right now, I'm just trying to take things one step at a time. I don't know what the future holds, and honestly, that scares me. But I'm trying to stay strong and keep moving forward, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. I don't know when I'll have something worth updating on again, but I promise I'll keep you posted. For now, I'm just trying to find my footing. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I remember promising to update when I had something worth sharing, and here I am, keeping that promise. So here's the latest. The divorce is finalized. It's done. That's pretty much the only update I have right now. The whole process was surprisingly quick and straightforward. We didn't have any big things to split. No property, no kids, no complicated financial ties. The apartment we shared? My ex-husband had already reached out to the landlord to have his name taken off the lease, so that was a non-issue. It was all very cut and dry. No dramatic court battles, no lengthy negotiations, just a clean break. Everyone just went their own way. I know this probably isn't the update some of you were hoping for. There's no big twist, no shocking turn of events. The divorce is finalized, and that's it. Now I'm left to pick up the pieces and figure out how to move on with my life. I won't lie, this isn't easy. I miss my husband every day. Some days are harder than others, and there are moments when it hits me like a ton of bricks. The realization that this is my new life, that the person I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with is now just a chapter in my past. It's tough. But I know I have no choice but to keep moving forward. Life doesn't pause for heartbreak. I want to thank everyone who has supported me through this. Your kindness, advice, and encouragement have meant so much to me. I didn't expect to find so much empathy and understanding from strangers on the internet, but I did, and I'm grateful. As for the hate comments and DMs, well, I guess I should say thank you for those too. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to leave a hateful message or to send me a nasty DM. It shows that you care enough to engage, even if it's in a negative way. And while it stings, it's also a reminder that I'm human, that I've made mistakes, and that not everyone will be on my side. But that's okay. I'm learning to accept that and move on. So that's where I'm at right now. The divorce is over, and now I have to focus on rebuilding my life. Thank you again to everyone who's been there for me, whether with support or criticism. It all means something in the end.